The Unfiltered by Jade.
Jade.
Welcome to the Unfiltered by Jade, where we educate, empower, and entertain. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, download, donate, and make everybody know about this.
Beats by RB Records.
Shopping assistance, your style, your budget. Our services include online and local shopping for individuals and businesses, personal shopping, purchasing of company and office supplies, importing and exporting small packages across Jamaica and worldwide, and helping you find unique gifts and items for all events and occasions. Contact us at 876-919-5195 or shoppingassistance2015@gmail.com. Shopping Assistance, your style, your budget.
Welcome back to the Unfiltered by Jade. Today we have here Sheila, Wray, Gregoire. And today we are going to speak about her book, The Great Sex Rescue. And this book is about changing the evangelical conversation about sex. So Sheila, she is the host of Bear Marriage Podcast. She is an author and she's a Christian marriage and sex blogger and podcaster. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm excited about our conversation today. So I want to first find out before we even dive into the book. We're going to speak about certain chapters of the book. Before we even dive there, I want to find out first what was behind the reasoning of the book.
Well, it's kind of a funny thing. So I have been in the marriage space online since around 2008. I started mommy blogging about, housework, parenting, organizing. And the more I talked about sex, the more my traffic grew. And so my blog kind of became this Christian sex space, which is weird. Like nobody starts off thinking, I want to be the Christian sex lady because that's just uncomfortable. But it didn't bother me. So I kept writing about sex. My traffic was growing. I kept trying to share information on how to have, a good sex life in your marriage. But people kept having the same problems and I couldn't figure out what the issue was. And then one day it was in January of 2019, I had a migraine and I was procrastinating. And so I was on what was then called Twitter. And people were arguing about whether they needed love or respect. And they were referring to Emerson Eggerich's book, Love and Respect, which implies that women need love and men need respect. And I thought, well, I'm a woman and I prefer respect. And I have that book upstairs, but I've never read it. So this is a great way to procrastinate. So I went and got the book and I turned to the sex chapter and it was like a nuclear bomb went off in my living room because it was so awful. I read, if your husband is typical, he has a need that you don't have. That need is for physical release. If he doesn't get physical release, he'll come under satanic attack.
What?
Yeah, and there wasn't a single word in there about how sex is for women too, that women should feel pleasure, that women can have a libido, that it's about intimacy. And I thought, if this is what the evangelical church is teaching about sex, no wonder people still have problems. And maybe it isn't enough to just give healthy information. We have to actually counteract the unhealthy stuff. And that's what started us on this journey. So on my team, I had a statistician. I had my daughter, Rebecca Lindenbach, who was a psychometrics grad, and we just decided to do a huge research project. So we ended up surveying 20,000 evangelical women from around the world to find out how a lot of these messages that are in evangelical books actually affect women's marital and sexual satisfaction. And we identified a lot of stuff that was harmful. And so we're trying to change that conversation to say, this isn't what Jesus wanted, and let's get back to what's actually healthy.
I love that. Sheila, when somebody brought it to my attention, I just say, this person has a podcast and I think it's something that you're interested in. And I listened, I was like, oh my God, this has touched on a lot of things that I have seen where women don't think sex is for them. And because of that, because of the teaching that they have gotten in church. And I've always been an advocate for churches need to speak about sex and making it a topic of something of interest, and there's no shame in it, and women can be okay to say, I want sex. It's okay. It's not just for men, it's for women. And I feel like I'm going ahead of this. First of all, Sheila, what happened?
There's so much we can say because it's so bad. I know.
In the book, you talk about what happened to sex. What happened to sex, Sheila?
Well, I like to put it this way. The Bible doesn't talk about sex the way that we do. If you look biblically, there's all kinds of things that we say that sex is supposed to be. Now, not a lot of marriages that are portrayed in the Bible are not the way God intended them to be. But I'm talking about when you look at the advice that actually is from God's heart, we notice a few things. So in Genesis 4, verse 1, for instance, which is the first time sex is mentioned, it says Adam knew his wife Eve and they conceived a son. And that on face value, that looks like God is just embarrassed of saying the real word. But actually, when you look at the Hebrew root for that word to know, it's the same root that David uses in the Psalms when he says, search me and know me, O God. And I think that's deliberate, that scripture is telling us that sex is not just physical. It's an intimate knowing of two people. So it's supposed to be intimate. We know from Song of Solomon that it is pleasurable for both people. I mean, she says more words than he does in that book, and she's having a good time. So it's pleasurable for both. And we know from 1 Corinthians 7 that it's supposed to be mutual. And that's kind of the framework that we use. You know, sex is something which is mutual, intimate, and pleasurable for both. But that isn't the way we talk about it. We talk about sex as if it's a male entitlement and a female obligation. Like sex is entirely for the guy. And that sets up so much dysfunction in marriage, so much shame, and it just isn't healthy. And we need to root this out and say that was never what God intended if we're going to get back to what passion and beauty really is.
True. And I've heard some women say, their husbands, I've never seen them naked, because even the act of sex, getting naked to have sex, they don't want to have. So they do so either with the sheets or the lights off because of the embarrassment or the shame that they face. And it's also because of what the church teaches. And I'm not in any way here bashing the church for anything. I'm just saying churches need to have more open conversations, and don't be afraid to talk to your adults about sex.
I think the church was trying to do a good thing. I think a lot of this misinformation, some of it came out of honest attempts to counteract a lot of the rhetoric in the world, which is anything goes. And so they were trying to say, no, we got to get this right. And sex is only meant for marriage. And so, you're not supposed to think about it, do it, whatever. But that message can cause a lot of shame. Yes. But then it also came out of a culture where, men were just prioritized over women, and the church was in that too. I don't believe that's God's heart. I don't believe that's the way Jesus acted, but we're still in a culture which prioritizes men in many ways. It has historically, less so now than 100 years ago, but we're still dealing with that. And we see it in a lot of our sex teaching.
And it's almost as if, if it is that we women don't give our husband or our spouses sex, they're going to cheat on us and it's our fault.
Exactly. And that was another big message that we measured. So in our survey of 20,000 women for the Great Sex Rescue, we found 4 big findings, like 4 big teachings that really mess things up. And one of them was that a woman should have frequent sex with her husband to keep him from watching porn or to keep him from having an affair. The book Every Man's Battle, which sold like 4 million copies in that series, it actually called women methadone for their husband's sex addiction.
What?
Oh, I know. It was disgusting. It said, when your husband is quitting cold turkey, be like a merciful vial of methadone for him.
Oh my goodness.
And for those of you who don't know, like methadone is a drug that they give you when you're trying to get off of drugs like heroin. So if you're addicted to some of these other drugs, they give you methadone because it numbs it. And so it's like methadone. It's kind of like saying, hey, women, you're not what he really wants. He really wants this other thing, but he will settle for you.
Oh man, it
And
just
you will
degrades
numb
women
him
even
enough.
more.
I know, it's awful.
Don't sleep with someone you don't know. Let's talk about that.
So, like we said, sex is supposed to be intimate. And that means that everybody's needs, wants, and desires have to matter. And when we say that sex is really about him getting sexual release so that he doesn't come under satanic attack, and again, that's from Love and Respect, which is the number one marriage study book used in North American evangelical churches. When we say that, then what we're essentially saying is that she doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because if sex is all about his physical release, then sex is not about knowing her at all.
No.
In fact, it's not even about knowing him. It's just about numbing him. And the problem is that a lot of people, men especially, but women can do this too, use sex to feel connected without having to do the work of connection. So they use sex so they can feel like they're close, but it isn't a true intimacy because they don't really know each other. So they're using sex to kind of paper over issues in their marriage because it's less vulnerable to have sex with someone than it is to actually share, your hopes,
And
your
speak about
dreams,
it
your
in
fears.
heart. It's almost pacifying your feeling. Let me just do this so we don't have to argue. Or
Exactly.
let me just do this so it becomes like sure.
Yeah. And it really short circuits intimacy.
Yes. And even for men, it's just sometimes a release. They want to release, and it's a selfish way of doing things when sex is supposed to be for both of us.
Exactly.
Not just for one person. Becoming more than roommates. This one really struck something with me because I know people personally who are roommates. Or there's this saying now going around that people want to be roommates but have sex. That's just it. So there's no intimacy, there is no anything. So can you just...
Yeah, so the whole idea of sex being mutual, which is what we read in 1 Corinthians 7, that, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to the wife, and the wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to the husband, and do not deprive each other. Like, we often think of those verses as something kind of negative, telling women, hey, you're not allowed to say no. But if you actually look at them, they're quite revolutionary because everything that he gets, she gets too. And this was written at a time in the Roman Empire when men had the right to kill their wives if they wanted. Like, they had complete control over their wives' bodies. And Paul is writing into this and saying, wait a minute, she owns his body too. This is totally mutual. Yes. And that's the picture that we're supposed to have, is that both of you should be wanting sex. Both of you should be enjoying sex. And so in Becoming More Than Roommates, we looked at this issue of desire and libido. Like, how do we get to the point where both of us want it? And interestingly, I think there's a big misperception that the husband is always the one with the higher sex drive.
True.
It's not true. It isn't in a bare majority. So I think I might get these stats slightly wrong because I can't always remember the numbers, but I think it's about 56% of men have the higher libido. But 19% of women do. And then in around 23%, it's shared. So there isn't, it's not like he wants it more, she wants it more.
Yeah, so that's what we have grown up hearing. So you hear that men want sex more than women. So, okay, you're married now. So the thought process is, okay, for me to keep my husband, I have to have sex a lot with him and I have to try and push without us even recognizing that, hey, I want it too.
Exactly.
So it's not just about what your wants, it's also about my wants.
Exactly. So, and that's what we want, is we want to get to the point where both of us want sex in a healthy way, not to cover up problems, not to be a way of connecting without actually emotionally connecting, not as a sin management tool. So I have sex so that I don't watch porn or have an affair, but that we both want sex because we love each other, because we want to have fun, and because we want to connect. That's a good thing. And so how do you get there? And what we found for women is that libido, it's normal for women not to want something that doesn't do them any good.
Yes.
You know, if sex hurts, if sex isn't pleasurable, then no wonder you don't want it. And I think a
Right.
lot of women are berating ourselves for not wanting something, when it's like libido is not actually the problem. Libido is usually a symptom of what is going on in the marriage.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm about to list 5 things, everybody. So as you're listening, okay, I want you to remember these 5 things. When a woman frequently reaches orgasm during sex, when they have high marital satisfaction, when she feels emotionally connected during sex, so she doesn't feel dehumanized or like he's using her or anything like that, when there's no porn use in the marriage, and when there's no sexual dysfunction, then frequency pretty much takes care of itself and her desire starts to build. So what I tell women is if you feel like you have very little desire, let's look at the root and let's see, you know, are there relationship issues? Are you actually having fun when you have sex?
True.
You know, does it hurt? Do you feel used? Because you shouldn't be expected to want sex if those other things are going on.
I shouldn't be forced into it also.
Absolutely.
Just to satisfy a need. That's interesting. Due to sex isn't sexy.
Yeah. This is actually our biggest and I think most important finding. So one of the other messages that we measured, which was really harmful to women, is the idea that a wife is obligated to give her husband sex when he wants it.
That's what we're told.
Yeah, exactly. And when women believe this, okay, to give you an example of how damaging this is, her chance of experiencing primary sexual pain increases to almost the same statistical effect as prior abuse.
Mercy.
So our bodies interpret obligation sex as trauma. That's yeah, and I don't think a lot of people even understand this, but there's a sexual dysfunction disorder called vaginismus, which is a pain disorder, where penetration becomes really painful, if not impossible. And this can be related to postpartum, so, you know, after you have a baby. But when it's not postpartum, 23% of evangelical women suffer from vaginismus in some form or another, which is about 2.5 times the rate of the general population. Like, this is our problem. And no one's talking about it. And what we found is that it's highly correlated with this idea that a wife is obligated to give her husband sex, because obligation says to a woman, you don't matter. He has the right to use you however he wants. And so we turn what is supposed to be a knowing into an owing.
Yeah. I owe you sex now.
Exactly. And like, that is not sexy, because it's like, it's saying, you know, it's not about you. He just is going to use your body. Like, that is not sexy. That is actually really dehumanizing.
It is. It is. It is. And that's not what God intended sex for.
Right. But I think a lot of people have this fear that if we take away obligation, then she's not going to have sex ever. That the only thing that is keeping women having sex is obligation. But it's actually not true at all. Like I said, if you make sex good for women, and if there's a good marriage relationship, then her desire tends to build.
Yes.
But if there's a bad marriage relationship, then sometimes obligation is all you have. And so these pastors are preaching obligation instead of preaching health. Yes, and it's wrong.
A healthy marriage will equal to a healthy sex life.
Exactly.
Yeah. When duty becomes coercion.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's sad. And I think that a lot of us don't have an accurate picture of what coercion and rape can look like in marriage. When we read for the Great Sex Rescue, we looked at 13 of the best-selling resources on sex and marriage. And in many of them, we found anecdotes of what is marital rape, and it often wasn't called that. Or it was joked about. So in the book, His Needs, Her Needs, for instance, there was a quote where a husband is saying, you know, I feel like I'm begging her or even raping her, but I can't help it. I need to make love.
Wow. And
this was just a throwaway line. No one said, hey, rape is wrong and rape can happen in marriage. in the book, The Act of Marriage by Tim and Beverly LaHaye, which is a classic. It's been reprinted 4 times. And it has an anecdote of a woman named Matilda, who reports that her husband held her down while she was kicking and screaming on her wedding night and raped her. And this continued throughout their marriage. And then Tim LaHaye describes Matilda and her equally unhappy husband. So he calls the rapist equally unhappy as the rape victim. And again, went through 4 different editions and nobody took that anecdote out. And so we see a lot of marital rape anecdotes in our literature. In the Every Man's Battle series, they said, we know men who are coercing their wives into sex, 2, 3, 4 times a day. If your husband demands sex more than once a day, that's wrong. So it's like saying it's okay for him to coerce you once a day, just not more than that.
Wow. So question though, is it that these Christians or people in general, they don't see an issue if it is the husband is raping his wife because she's supposed to, and I use the word supposed.
You know what? I would love an answer to that, because I'm reading this stuff and I'm thinking, how could you even write that? Like, what is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you? Why would you even write something like that? Is it that you think that you're obligated to, so it's okay for you to rape your wife?
That's the only thing I can think of, is that they think that men are so owed sex that rape isn't rape. And so let me say this clearly. If you cannot give an enthusiastic yes, it is coercion.
Okay.
And rape is not just being held down, kicking and screaming. Coercion is any time that you have sex to prevent something bad from happening. So, I'll get emails from women saying, my small group meets at my house and I have to have sex with my husband before everyone gets here, or else he'll tell embarrassing stories about me to my friends. Goodness. Or I have to, we're going to the beach tomorrow. I have to have sex before we go to the beach, or else my husband will make the day miserable for the kids. That is a form of coercion. So if you have to have sex to keep him from being mean to the kids or mean to you, if you have to have sex to get him to give you money, if you have to have sex to control his moods, or if you wake up and he's having sex with you in your sleep, or if he's used a sex toy on you where you told him not to, this is all coercion. Even if you got aroused from it, it is coercion, and it's not okay.
It's not okay. It's not okay. And it's also manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a toxic relationship to be in when it is that your spouse does that to you.
Yes.
Toxic relationship. How has the church's message of sex affected sex, or the lack of it?
I think the big thing is that our focus has been on increasing frequency. So when you listen to, most sermons on sex, most messages about sex, they go something like this, all right? God made sex to be this beautiful gift between 2 people, and so women, you need to do it more. And it's like, if it is such a beautiful gift, why don't women want it? Like, the message makes no sense. Like, if sex is this wonderful, beautiful thing, then women would want it. So there has to be a reason why women don't want it.
True.
And when we look at it, there are reasons. Like, the obligation sex is a big message. The fact that we have attached so much shame to sex. And another simple one is the orgasm gap.
Yes.
We found that 95% of men report that they almost always reach orgasm in a given sexual encounter, but only 48% of women do. So we have a 47-point orgasm gap. That's huge.
That's huge. That's a big thing.
Right. And so instead of teaching men, hey, give your wife sex that she enjoys, we tell women, give him more sex no matter what. And we've really flipped the script, because sex has become this male-focused obligation, rather than something beautiful that you get to experience and enjoy together, which is what it was meant to be. And couples who have great sex lives, and great marriages, they really, really enjoy each other. They have great marital satisfaction. But sex alone cannot create good marital satisfaction.
No.
Good sex relies on good marital satisfaction. It relies on treating each other well, on listening to each other, on valuing each other. But instead of teaching that, we're just telling women, no matter what's going on in your relationship, you need to give them sex. I mean, a perfect example of this is how much women are told that even in the postpartum period, so even after you've just had a baby, you need to make sure that you're giving him sex, or else he'll climb the walls. So, or even during your period, like Kevin Lehman in Sheet Music talks about how this one woman realized after 10 years of marriage that faithfulness is a 2-person job, and she can't expect her husband to go the 5 days during her period, without porn. And so she finds that if she gives him oral sex, it really helps. And so telling women that your period, or right after you had a baby, your job is to make sure that he gets sexual release, instead of telling men, hey, when your wife's uncomfortable or when she's recovering, your job is to make sure that she has the help that she needs.
And she's comfortable.
Yeah, they don't say that. And that's a huge, huge issue. It just shows how slanted things are. And we need to get back to God's heart. We're supposed to experience great passion. We're supposed to experience great love, but we can't do that when only one person matters and when obligation is over everything.
These are actually more serious than people think it is, though. This is actually more serious because it's placed on a woman's mind. Yeah. And because of what we're told, what we're taught growing up, becoming adults now, we have to face it. And this results in other things. So women can be going through depression. And because they don't want their husbands to go, they're going through depression, but they're thinking about, if I don't have sex with my husband, he's going to leave me still. What kind of marriage is that? What kind of relationship is that? If it is that you stayed and comforted me and helped me through this depression, I may just automatically want to have sex with you.
Yeah. And that's the way it honestly works. Is that desire grows out of love. And yes, we need to nurture it. In a healthy relationship, absolutely you need to nurture desire. But what we found is that usually when sex isn't going well, the problem is not the sex. The problem is the relationship dynamics around sex.
That's a lot to take in. That's a lot. Sheila, before we go, I want you to leave something out there for Christians, the evangelical churches, Christians on a whole. It doesn't matter which denomination. Leave something with them about, the great sex rescue. What is it that they need to change? What do we need to start changing for marriages to blossom and to flourish more in regards to even sex and having a healthy marriage overall?
We just need to remember that everybody matters. It's not just him that matters. She matters too. And any sex advice which hurts one person to benefit another is not of God.
Yeah.
And so much of the problem and the mess that we're in has been that we have taken advice from people who are writing these books who are not qualified. We've taken advice from pastors who are not qualified. Just because you have a seminary degree does not mean that you know anything about sex or about marriage. And so we need to start listening to people who have done research. We need to start paying attention to the research out there in journals, in science. And we need to stop saying, hey, just because someone knows their Bible means that they know anything about orgasm.
That's true. Very true.
My prayer is that we will raise the bar on what we consider healthy advice, because so much terribly unhealthy advice has slipped through and been in our bestsellers, and it needs to stop because the next generation deserves better than this. And our prayer is that in 10 years, nobody needs the Great Sex Rescue anymore because we fixed the problem.
I pray that's where we're reaching in the next 10 years. And I think the onus is on each one of us, even wives, to remind their husbands, I also matter.
Yeah. And you know what? Most men want sex that's good for their wives too. So I've talked to so many women who, the guys have listened to the Great Sex Rescue, especially on audio. I think men like listening to audiobooks more. And I don't know why, but anyway. And it's really, they finally have understood the negative dynamics and everything has changed. And those stories make me so happy.
I love that. Continue changing lives and stories so that we'll have a healthier community.
Yes.
Healthier people, healthier marriages, and we'll start thriving And hopefully, the divorce rate will come down because so many things are being fixed just by ensuring that the other person matters. So that's good. Sheila, where is it that we can find you?
So I have the Bare Marriage podcast. That's BARE. That's every Thursday it drops. We're also at baremarriage.com, and you can find our books, The Great Sex Rescue. And we've also got books for newlywed couples or engaged couples starting out, The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex and The Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex. And so you can find all of our books, our orgasm courses, like everything at baremarriage.com.
Nice. Thank you so much, Sheila. I really appreciated this conversation, especially because we as Christians don't talk about it much because of either embarrassment or of fear, or we don't know anything about our bodies and we haven't learned it and nobody has taken the time to teach us and we're afraid to even search our own bodies to figure it out, anything. Thank you so much. And thank you for your platform because it's educating people that they also need to do research on these things to find out how they can better themselves and their marriages. So I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you very much. That's been encouraging to me.
Yes. And I want to thank you to my listeners for continuing to listen to The Unfiltered by Jade. And we'll be back next week, Tuesday. Thank you.